Read that word right there and I'll double your pay. Rick Holden's voice cut through the marble-floored dining room like glass against stone. The clink of silverware stopped. Heads turned. Conversations trailed off. Malcolm Reed froze near table 3, tray of polished cutlery balanced in his hands. He wasn't just holding metal, he was holding the weight of dozens of stairs. Rick, the floor manager in his tailored blazer, jabbed a finger at the wine list propped up by crystal stemware. A single phrase glimmered in elegant cursive, Reverie Savage. You know what it means, right? No. Thought so. Rick's tone dripped with contempt. A couple nearby stifled laughter. A waiter shook his head, but said nothing. Malcolm's jaw tightened. His hand flexed around the tray. Then, quietly but firmly, he spoke. You sure you want to play that game? The room shifted. A challenge had just been returned. Rick's chuckle rolled across the dining room like smoke. What, nervous I'll expose something? His smile wasn't friendly, it was a weapon. Malcolm shifted his weight, voice calm but steady. No. I just think it's awkward, when my father signs your check. A ripple of silence passed through the room. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. One guest, an older woman in pearls, leaned forward sharply. She had recognized the surname, the same one carved into the brass plate at the entrance. Reed and Sons, EST 1978. Rick scoffed, forcing a laugh. Funny kid. Now go polish some glassware. His words were meant to dismiss, but his eyes betrayed unease. He glanced at the maitre d', who busied himself with menus as if he hadn't heard. Malcolm walked toward the kitchen, brushing past a couple whispering in hushed tones. Did he just say his dad owns this place? The tension lingered, hanging like smoke no fan could clear. Inside the narrow staff hallway, Malcolm leaned against the cool wall tiles, breathing hard. His chest tightened, not from fear, but from holding back. Luis, a dishwasher still wearing damp gloves, slipped closer. Why you let him talk like that, man? His voice was half outrage, half admiration. Malcolm shook his head slowly. Because he doesn't know yet. The words hung heavy, foreshadowing something larger. Flashback, 1 week earlier. The study smelled faintly of oak and leather. Malcolm sat opposite his father, staring down at a crisp letter on the desk. You want me to work at the bottom of our own company? He asked, disbelief in his tone. His father's voice was calm, measured. I want you to see what's broken before you try to fix it. Malcolm's fingers brushed the family crest embossed on the letterhead. His father's eyes held no doubt, only expectation. Back in the present, the sounds of laughter and glasses clinking filtered in from the dining room. The contrast was sharp, one world of polished elegance, another of silent endurance. Malcolm straightened his apron, pushed away from the wall, and stepped back into the lion's den. Rick spotted him immediately. Back already? What, forget how to mop? The tension was about to snap. Malcolm paused at the dining room threshold, his gaze sweeping across the polished surfaces, chandeliers glittering overhead. His eyes flicked to the framed company charter mounted proudly near the maitre d's podium, its golden edges gleamed under warm light. In that photo, a younger Rick once shook hands with Charles Reed, Malcolm's father. Malcolm's hand brushed his apron pocket. He stepped forward. Rick rolled his eyes. What now? You quitting in the middle of shift too? His voice carried the same mocking edge, but his laughter sounded thinner this time. Without a word, Malcolm pulled a folded page from his apron. He set it gently on the maitre d's podium, his movements deliberate. Guests craned their necks. The maitre d' stiffened, recognizing the letterhead immediately. The memo bore Charles Reed's signature. Its words, crisp and final. Effective today, Malcolm Reed has full operational observation rights across all Reed and Sons properties. The hush that followed was absolute. Rick's smirk collapsed. You're not serious. Malcolm's voice rang clean, cutting through the silence. I'm not here to fire you, Rick. Not yet. I'm here to see how far you'd go humiliating the person who signs off on your bonuses. Whispers shot through the dining room like sparks. Guests exchanged glances. Staff froze mid-step. The maitre d' swallowed hard, adjusting his collar. One busser, wide-eyed, stepped aside and quietly offered Malcolm his seat. Rick stared down at the memo, the weight of the paper heavier than stone. His mouth opened, closed, then stayed shut. Malcolm didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned, walked toward the kitchen, and paused at the doorway. Rick called after him, his voice suddenly small. You should have said something. Malcolm didn't look back. His reply was steady, final. I didn't have to. You already said enough about yourself. The dining room remained hushed. For once, Rick Holden had no words. Malcolm disappeared into the staff hallway, his footsteps quiet against the tiled floor. Behind him, the restaurant atmosphere shifted from polished chatter to uneasy whispers. Guests leaned toward each other, murmuring. Phones had begun to lift discreetly, a red recording light glowing here and there. Rick stood frozen near the podium, staring at the memo still lying open, its ink undeniable. His reflection in the glass frame of the company charter stared back at him, older, harsher, and suddenly smaller. The maitre d' cleared his throat, but said nothing. Even he knew authority had just shifted. A busser, still holding an empty tray, muttered under his breath, "He's the boss's son," the words carried across the room like wildfire. Inside the hallway, Malcolm pressed a hand against the cool wall. His breaths were steadying, but his thoughts spun back to his father's study. He could still hear the old man's voice, "Dignity isn't something you shout for. It's something you hold, even when they push you down." Back in the dining room, Rick forced himself upright, but the usual command in his posture was gone. He glanced at the maitre d', at the staff lying stiffly against the wall, and finally at the guests, many of whom now looked at him with disdain. Then came the sharp sound of a notification. Luis, the dishwasher, had already texted a screenshot of the memo to staff group chats. Within minutes, everyone in the building would know. Rick's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he found himself speechless. The shift wound down under a veil of silence. Waiters moved mechanically, guests lingered longer than usual, their curiosity sharper than their appetites. Rick finally stepped out from behind the podium, scanning the room as if searching for Malcolm, but the young man was already gone. In the back hallway, Malcolm stood alone. He carefully removed his black apron, folded it into a neat square, and set it on the counter. The clock ticked above him, steady and unbothered. He rubbed his palms together slowly, as though washing away not sweat, but the residue of humiliation he refused to carry. Out front, the memo remained at the maitre d's podium, bold and undeniable, Charles Reed's signature visible to anyone who passed. Employees walking by stole glances, their expressions a mix of shock and quiet satisfaction. None spoke. But silence itself became the loudest verdict. Rick returned to the podium, staring at the framed company photo beside the memo, himself decades younger, smiling proudly as he shook hands with Charles Reed. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him. Guests whispered, some had already uploaded clips. For the first time, Rick had no sharp words, no authority to hide behind. Malcolm hadn't needed to fire him, to yell, or to prove anything. His calm had been enough. His silence, a mirror. Sometimes dignity doesn't roar. It waits, steady, patient, until the truth reveals itself. And in that dining room, everyone had seen it. Sometimes silence carries more weight than shouting ever could. Malcolm Reed didn't need to prove his worth with a title or raise his voice in a room full of whispers. He only had to hold the mirror long enough for others to see themselves. In a world where power often disguises itself as cruelty, dignity can be the loudest force. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more moments where quiet strength reshapes what justice looks like.